All right, welcome to another episode of Ascension with A Course in Miracles, and I am Laina Orlando. Today it is July the 10th. Oh my gosh, a year is almost over. And today we're going to continue. And actually, this was part of Stacy's request. And as I was checking in, were we going to go back and keep going with a text as we had done before? Or would we complete the lesson that we opened up to last week, which was inspired because of 4th of July and the Declaration of Independence and all of those wonderful things. So we kind of went through a little bit of a history, and if you want to see the first half, Cherie, it's on my YouTube channel at Laina Orlando, and it was episode 154 last week. This will be episode 155. But last week we looked at lesson 186. And we only got through half of it. We got through the first 5 paragraphs. And the title of that lesson is Salvation of the World Depends on Me. And I basically tied how our founding fathers very much are in alignment with this exact lesson, because they understood the salvation of the new world depended on them, that for America to be able to exist, it depended on those very courageous souls who chose to sail the ocean blue and come to a total new continent. They had never been here. It's treacherous traveling back in those days. No compass. Yes, they had maps, but those were not maps that were not done with satellites or airplanes or anything like that. So everything was pretty rustic, pretty rough in many ways, but they had this knowingness in them that they had to leave the crown. They had to leave being oppressed by those who believed that they were superior to the rest of humanity. The system that was set up of the monarchy was really the 1%, if you want to call it that in modern terminology, the 1%, and then the 99% had to bow down, had to pay taxes, had to do whatever it is that the crown wanted them to do. So these founding fathers came to the US, and in their documents, they stated that all men, all women, I mean, it's implied, all humans are created equal, endowed by the Creator with the same inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, as I have been studying the course now for, I guess, going on 12 years, I see the exact same theme, that all of us are created equal. As a matter of fact, the Course in Miracles says that God has one son, meaning God has one child. All of us are the children of God. All of us are seen as equals, all made of the same energy, all made of the same substance in the image of the Creator. The Course makes it really clear. We were all created to continue the creation of God, meaning to extend the kingdom. And to extend the kingdom, we must operate like the creators that we are, consciously operate as the creator that we are, which is to extend the kingdom from love. So as creators of our own reality, as I've got on this chart, when we create as God created, it created with love. It creates with light. Everything is illuminated. Everything is transparent. Everything, you can see everything. God hides nothing. And this is the God of my own understanding, because I had to have my own personal experience to come to know this God. I grew up with a God of the church, which was a God of fear, a God of wrath, and doesn't like you, it turns you into a pillar of salt. But the God that I've come to know, that I've come to feel, that I've come to experience, mostly through the teachings of A Course in Miracles, is a God that is very loving. It holds no grudges against anyone. It judges no one. It punishes no one. But what is consistent in the Course is to remind us that we are eternal. So this is why when I look at the Constitution, and I see a couple of you who were here last week, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, life, we have eternal life, meaning if we want to keep reincarnating, we can. But if you want to incarnate at a higher frequency, then you better understand the power that we have as godly creators, godlike creators. We have liberty. We have free will. Every single one of us has been endowed with free will to choose to extend the kingdom with God, with knowing awareness that we are loving beings first and foremost, or we can forget who we are, listen to what we've been taught, buy into the illusion of separation, that we don't belong to each other, that we're not really equal, that we are separate, and therefore our differences should be feared, or at the very least be worried about, because those people that are different in age or in color or in gender or whatever, in financial means or religious beliefs or even football teams or political parties. If we focus on what is different, then we are going to be operating in the realm of the ego. So we have the free will to do either one. However, every one of us who is born into this dimension, into this worldly planet, we have, it's not our fault. We are born into a society that is so disconnected from their truth, because those parents and grandparents that we come into relationship with, they had their parents and grandparents who had their own opinions, their own beliefs, their own ideas of how they did things before. So we are born into societies that have hand-me-down beliefs, not only ideas about religion, ideas about politics, ideas about even football teams or whatever, but they also have a parenting style that is based on the teachings of the monarchy, hierarchy. Father knows best, parents knows best. The monarchy is up here, government's up here, the parents are up here, children are down here. So we are born into a system of oppression, no matter how good our parents were, no matter how loving they may have been. We are born into a system that has us believe that we don't have free will, that we have to follow the will of our parents, the will of a system outside of us. So as we have been studying in the chapter that we had been in the text, we were studying, I'll just mention it briefly, in chapter 30, we learned about idols, how idols were created. We worship external things. So we are conditioned, we are raised to believe that something outside of us has power. And when we are taught that something outside of us has power as children, we are taught to believe not only does mom and dad have power, and then the church has power, but then we're taught to believe that our partner has power, that money has power, that the job has power. So little by little by little, we are systematically trained out of knowing that the source of all power is within us. So we develop this idea of victim and bully, which is the way the ego operates. And the victim and the bully is the two faces of the ego. When we are in victimization, it's because we feel less than others. We feel inferior to others. Then what happens is, because we were created to create, we become co-creators of a reality that believes that we have been victimized, and or that bullies exist. And by the way, bullies is two sides of the same coin. All victims become bullies. All bullies are victims. There is no way around that. But it's very difficult to see that clearly until you make a commitment to unpack that. When you unpack the way the ego operates, you can see that we have been, as the Course in Miracles teaches, miscreating. Meaning we have been creating our reality, but we've been creating our reality by believing something external has power to us, or that we have power over others externally. So a bully thinks, I'm part of the 1%, you owe me whatever. A victim believes, oh, I better pay you. I better, I'm part of the 99%. I better do what you tell me to do, or I'm going to be in trouble. If I don't pay my taxes, I'm going to be in trouble. You're going to put me in jail. So we grow up with this mindset that some get to have and others do not. And those who do not better watch out, because otherwise they're going to get in trouble. So we have the liberty to believe that. And then the other thing that we have been endowed with by our Creator, that's in the Constitution, that's in our Declaration of Independence, is that we have the ability to pursue happiness. Course in Miracles says that that's our purpose. You don't have to pursue happiness. Happiness is your purpose. It's the one purpose God gives us. Because when we co-create and when we operate on this planet in awareness that we're equal, in an understanding that God is love, you cannot help but experience life in happiness. Everything that you do, whether it's parenting, whether it's tending to your home, the animals, your job, whatever it is, you're going to enjoy it. Because there is a sense of knowing that you have a temporary experience in this lifetime because you have life and it's eternal. You recognize that this is a short experience, might as well enjoy it. But you can only enjoy it if you do unto others as you want them to do unto you. There is, here we tie into the teachings that Jesus came to give us 2,000 years ago that have been totally and completely bastardized by religion, used to oppress, again, back to some have and some don't, the whole religious system. And there are lots of beautiful things within the religious systems. Within all of them, there are beautiful things. There are truths in them. But there's also a political side to every single one of these organized religions that establish a hierarchy. Back to those, whether it's the crown, whether it's the governments, presidents, whatever, CEO of a corporation, father knows best, whether it doesn't matter what it is. Whenever you put somebody at the top and everybody else at the bottom in a pyramid scheme, basically we are taught in that it's okay to have bullies and victims, which is how the ego operates. So the process that humanity is undergoing right now, a very intense process of awakening, when we begin to understand our place in all that is, when we begin to understand that we're made of the same energy that everything is made of, and we expand our awareness from our problems here, which is where the ego keeps us, just in my own issues, my kids, my money, my house, my partner, or lack thereof, my sickness, maybe my family, maybe just a little bit, my best friends or a community, a small community. That's where the ego likes to keep us focused with blinders on. When we begin to move through this process of awakening, once you work on your own inner stuff and you heal yourself, and to heal is to make yourself whole, to stop believing things that are not true about you, to accept the truth of who you are, a divine being, a powerful being, one with a creative source. And we begin to expand our awareness of who we truly are, meaning we begin to see that we belong to each other. All men and women are created equal. Then the concerns from being my own issues, my own depression, or my own addiction, or my own job, we begin to see clearly more of all that is. And that's really how you're expanding in your healing journey, is you begin to care more about all that is. When you are at a place that you really care about the whole of humanity, that you have moved to a place that you perceive things as the whole planet, you're expanding. You are becoming more holistic in your perspective, because you know that as within, so without. What happens to you happens outside. And you realize that whatever happens outside comes from you, that nothing exists outside that is not affected by you, because we are creators of our reality, meaning we've projected everything that is. So to move to a place of wholeness is to understand our oneness with all that is. Once we get comfortable that the whole planet is a state of oneness, now you pay attention to worldly kinds of things. Then comes the recognition that we're part of the cosmos, that we are part of the universe. Then we move to a place where we have expanded our awareness of our of our sphere of influence. We recognize that to sit in contemplation of the whole of the universe is to desire goodness for all of it, is to be able to sit and realize that the light that comes from you, the love that comes from you, you want to extend it to all that is, because all that is you. So there is a process by which the mind has to be purified, in essence, to expand in our understanding of who we are. Let me put this other chart. This chart, I call it the power of awareness, because it's a clearer understanding that we all incarnate from a place where we know we are part of all that is. We are non-physical soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. We incarnate as babies, operate at the highest possible frequency. All babies come in at extending love. That's why nobody's afraid of a baby. Everybody wants to hold a baby because they're pure love. We feel that from them. And then we get indoctrinated, and little by little, we get pulled down into the realm of the ego, where we operate as victims and bullies. And that's pretty much all we do. The pendulum swings from victim to bully, victim to bully. And when we operate as a victim or a bully, we're always concerned about us. What can I get? What do I need to protect? It's a very selfish experience. And the ego has us operate in only this realm, meaning our awareness of our connection to all that is gets blocked, deliberately blocked. Churches, religion blocks it. Our jobs block it. When we go for a profession, there's this profession and these certificates, and then there's that profession and those certificates. So everything gets separated. It's like segregation is a realm of the ego. So we stay down here in a very, very narrow idea of who we are, and we basically get lost here. This is where most people live their lives. I think it was Thoreau back in the 1800s who said, men and women are content to live lives of quiet desperation, paying the bills and doing the best that you can so you can retire and hope you don't get sick. And if you get sick, hope you have insurance. A very, very narrow perspective of life, very deliberately focused just on you and survival. And like I said, a small circle, immediate family, immediate friends, and that's about it. Very, very little concern with world issues, because you don't even know that you contribute to all of that. You kind of think that you're just doing your own thing and you're a good person, not knowing that you're contributing, as we talked about before. We pay the taxes that fund the wars that kill people and children in foreign countries. But most of us don't want to see that, because to see that is to begin to recognize the way the ego operates. And those who have been in controlling positions don't want you to know how powerful you are, because if you begin to realize all men and women are created equal and you gain your voice, as our founding fathers wanted us to do, then we would demand that the governments change so that they actually do serve the will of the people. And that means that it's of the people, by the people, for the people. We have to become participants in service in the machine, in the government machine. But most of us, again, don't want to do that. We'll send our money, you run things, and tell us what we need to do to be okay and stay out of trouble. And I'm going to focus just on my stuff over here. Again, very myopic. So the process of awakening is a process of healing the stuff that we have with mom and dad, the issues that we grew up with. We've got to heal that, because as we heal our issues with our parents, and it only comes, as the Course teaches, through forgiving them. They did the best that they could with what they had. If you felt victimized by your parents, meaning they were bullies, is because they were victims of the bullies that they were parented by. So it's a whole process of unwinding this massive ball of suffering that has been created and handed down as if that's the way it is. But it doesn't have to be that way, because we make it up as we go. As we begin to change our perspectives, as we begin to become whole inside, we show up differently. As I've said so many times, I parented my daughter in a very unconscious way, because I didn't start my journey until she was about 12 years old. But then she had a brother who was 8 years younger. So he was 4 years old when I started my journey. I shifted how I parented him than how I parented her. And now my daughter, through her own awareness, through her own journey, is parenting her children much more consciously than I parented her brother. So we are shifting, we are changing things because we're ascending in consciousness. We're returning to remembering the truth of who we are. And as we return to remembering the truth of who we are, a conscious parent doesn't tell its child, father knows best, mother knows best. My daughter, as all conscious parents would do at this time, recognizes that we have a role to guide our children, but knowing that our children come from God. Our children come from a source that is the creative source, whatever you want to call it. I had an issue with calling it God for the longest time, and I called it creator, source, spirit. I called it whatever, universe, until I got comfortable and have a relationship with God myself. And now to call it God is just a name. It told me at one point to call it Jesus. God is the source of the energy of love, an acronym for what it really is. Until I got comfortable with the word God, because everybody knows the word God, understands the word God. And for me, God, love, it's all the same thing. So I could call it love. When we understand that everybody comes from love, everybody comes from the essence of who we are, then well-being is natural because you're flooding every cell of your body with truth, with light, with high frequency. So health is a byproduct of that. Abundance, acceptance, honesty, eternal life, sharing, freedom to expand the kingdom, to expand your awareness, creativity, peace, grace are all part of that. When you grow up knowing that that's who you are, you're humbled by the awareness that a creative source created you so beautifully. But when you believe the ego, then we become arrogant and we begin to say, I'm not God. I'm not a creator. The world doesn't depend on what I do. It's not my job to save anybody else. I'm puny. I can't do that, which is quite arrogant because we're basically arguing with what we really actually are. Or we become so insecure and so victimized and just totally, completely become doormats because we think others know better than we do. All of that is arrogance of the ego because it doesn't accept who we really are. So in this particular lesson, 186, I'm just going to highlight a couple of things from the first 5 paragraphs, and then we'll jump into where we left off, which was actually in the middle, paragraph 5. But it starts off with salvation of the world depends on me. That's the title. It's a mantra. And then it goes on to say, here is a statement that will one day take all arrogance away from every mind. Because when you accept how God created you, and it created you to be part of the salvation of the world, meaning stop bullying the world, stop giving power away to the world. Salvation in the Course in Miracles means to spare yourself insanity, to spare yourself suffering. Salvation means own that you are magnificent, own that you are powerful, and you stop in your own mind blaming other people, judging other people, thinking somebody is better off than you are, somebody is less off than you are, or that you are not okay without having to have something or someone. That when you spare yourself those lies that are egoically driven, you come to a place of realizing that you are already amazing. Now, share your amazingness. Let that flow. Let that shine. Let that be your reality. But we can't let our reality be that we're okay because we're believing that we're not okay. And then we project that on our children. We project that on our community. We project that on the world. And then we try to control things. We attempt to make ourselves so special and so necessary in everybody's lives. And we become meddling people. But we are being invited to move out of that space and begin to accept the power that every being has. But to accept everybody else is powerful and capable, you must know that as your own reality. Again, very difficult to do when you're believing that you are a victim or that you are better than. So this is what all the work of healing is about. So it tells us that we got to stop this arrogance that I can't be okay because of what mommy and daddy did to me, or that others can't be okay because I'm in charge of them. That's arrogance, because it's stating that you know better than the creator. It's stating that you somehow have the ability to override the creative plan that has set all beings free, because all are equal, all endowed with the ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And if you get if you are one who operates in depression and anger and frustration, it's because that makes you happy. That makes your ego happy. So it's an addiction to being right about the things that make you feel bad. So we have to work on the way the mind operates. So again, this is why it says, all arrogance has to be removed from all minds, which means we have to humble ourselves and accept who we are as God said that we are. But we can't accept the God that we don't trust. So it's very difficult with a religious background to take A Course in Miracles and take what it says and accept it, because we have fears about God that we need to address, all indoctrinated into us through religion. Again, part of the plan of the hierarchy, where some are at the top and very few at the top and everybody else at the bottom. So those pyramid schemes that we have grown up in, it's time to let those go. And you can only let them go when you feel the calling inside to go into a very deep realm of healing. Then it goes on to tell us that it is through true humility do we accept the role, the function that has been given to us. And the world salvation depends on me means that you do your inner work, because as within, so without, as above, so below. You begin to generalize that how you perceive the world is really how you perceive yourself. And that is a work that takes time, because you basically have to see everything as a reflection. I mean, it's all a mirror letting us know who we are. And then we got to look in the mirror, because we've got to pay attention. So many of us want the outside world to be happy, but we have a frown, but we want the mirror to reflect a happy face. Well, we're not going to see a happy world outside until we get the frown off of our face, because it's a reflection. We have to recognize that that's how it all works. So it goes on to tell us in the course, in this particular lesson, that we have been, the means are given us by which it will be perfectly accomplished. So we've got to understand that when we become humble enough to say, okay, God, what would you have me do? And we want to learn, how do I become this loving being, full of grace, full of light, full of joy, full of truth, transparent? We've got to commit to a program. And the Course in Miracles is a program. And it's a very, very comprehensive program, but it requires a very deep level of commitment. You can't come to the course and study it for a month or even a year or even 2 years. You can't just come and take a little bit at a time and think that you're done. You've got to commit to until every single word resonates with you as the truth and you live by it. You're not done. There's still more to do. So we have to humble ourselves. And listen, I am like everybody else. I started my journey and read all kinds of things. Oh, they all sounded great, but I didn't dive into any one of those things until I found the course about 10 years into my journey. Almost exactly 10 years into my journey, I found the course, and I realized, looking back on the previous 10 years of my life, I had all kinds of spiritual teachings that were wonderful and lovely. I read them. I felt excited. I went to the workshops. I attended a lot of the things that the teachers would do and offer. And I filled myself with joy and high vibes for a weekend. And then I went back to my regular life, doing things my way. The course tells you in the very beginning, in the introduction, you cannot alter the course. You can take what you can take at any one given time, but you cannot alter it. You've got to follow it letter by letter by letter, because it is a very systematic and comprehensive way of completely unwinding the mind from the lies that we have been told that have us build an ego that operates with what is not true. So it requires an incredible honesty. So when you read something like salvation of the world depends on me, well, the average person, and I've coached a lot of average people who average in the way that they approach the course. Oh, salvation of the world depends on me. That sounds great. Read it. Boom, done. But do you sit and go, what does that mean? How does that apply to my life? How do I operate in that way all the time? You got to break it down. You've got to understand that if it tells you in here that I'm being arrogant when I think that there's nothing I can do for the world, then I got to look at what are the beliefs that I have that get in the way of my accepting my role, my function as God gave it to me to be part of the salvation of the world. Where's this arrogance coming from? Well, it's a whole bunch of beliefs that have me focus only on what's at my blinders, what's important to me, and not pay attention to the big picture. Because if I pay attention to the big picture, then I see how powerful I am. I see how important I am to the whole plan. That means I've got to begin to treat everyone. And in a world that we are made to pick sides, where this began to make so much sense for me was during the elections of 2016. When I saw so many in the spiritual community move this side, they only support the one party. And I began to go, wait a second, why is all these spiritual people hating this one man? And I began to realize, well, if the salvation of the world depends on me, I cannot be a party to hate anybody. I cannot be a party to judge anybody. I am here to bring love and understanding and curiosity and honesty and open-mindedness to all that there is. And then I began to listen. I began to be open-minded. Well, the course is not convenient for people who need to be right. People who need to, this is the only right way. The other way is not right. That is arrogance. That is saying my opinion based on what I was indoctrinated with is the only right way. But God, source, whatever you want to call it, Jesus through these teachings wants to free us from that need to protect and defend righteousness. It wants us to become open-minded, hear all parties, because when you become open-minded and you can hear everything, you cannot be controlled. The ego is all about control right there. It's controlling and suppressing and canceling and censoring. When you can begin to see how the world has become a place where some get to cancel and censor those that they don't want to hear, you begin to see the hierarchy. You begin to see the monarchy. You begin to see the idols that we have given power to. But you can't see that outside until you become open-minded. And you can't be open-minded if you need to be right. So there is a big process of humbling ourselves to accepting how powerful we are. Because when you take control of your mind back and you're not listening to what the talking heads tell you on television, and you begin to look at everybody as God created them, you begin to see the power that you have to forgive, to extend grace, to extend kindness and gentleness. Then you begin to see that you become the change you want to see in the world. How can we expect the other people that we don't like to be nice if we're not nice to them? So the Course in Miracles says, the only way the outer world is going to be saved, the only way you're going to see goodness out there is if you begin to find it in you. And it begins with looking at everything that you judge. You have to look at what you judge so you can see, do I judge it because I feel like a victim or I feel like a bully? Am I judging it because they oppress me, so they're bad? Or are you looking at it as a bully? I get to tell you what to do and I don't care what you have to say. So we have to look at all of that, regulate those energies within before we can then begin to extend it out. And there's no other way of doing this. So the course, then in this particular lesson, it tells us, let's go to lesson number 5. I'm going to read the beginning of it that was where we left off last time, and then I'll move on from there. So it tells us in paragraph 5, again, lesson 186, salvation of the world depends on me. Paragraph 5 says, there is one way and only one to be released from the imprisonment your plan to prove the false is true has brought to you. So when I look at the Course in Miracles and I made a decision, okay, this is all true. Let me get a little sticky note here so I can follow what I'm reading. And I look at something like this and it says, there is one way and only one way. I know I cannot let my ego get involved, because I need to find out what is the way. Jesus told us, I am the way. Buddha helped us see that there was a middle way. So we have had so many for so long pointing out what needs to be done. And the Buddha did it, Jesus did it, they all went inside. They came within. There is one way. You got to come inside. You got to find God within. And you can find God within if you think God is on a cloud somewhere, like Santa Claus deciding if you're naughty or nice. You've got to come in, find God inside. And how do you do that? Well, something like A Course in Miracles is a powerful way of doing that, because you have to come and find that loving God. But you can't find the loving God until you see your capacity for love. Because when you get back to being like a little child, you realize how loving and gentle you came in as. You got to return to that, to return to loving everybody, being gentle. That's why you can't take sides. That's why you can't say this person is bad and, this is the right person, that's a bad person. You have to be open-minded. The Course is very clear. Open-mindedness is a characteristic of a teacher of God. Tolerance is a characteristic of one who teaches what God is by being God, by being the vessel that extends the truth of God. Because really, that's what we're doing. Those who are awakening are the embodiment of heaven on earth. We're bringing heaven to earth. Instead of being out there on a cloud and you're going to die and maybe you go, we are bringing it and we are living. We are the living love, the living light of what God is. We have to become the change we want to see in the world. So when it tells me that there's one way and only one way, I'm going to follow the steps. I am going to do what it says, and I am not going to deviate. Not easy to do, but the only thing that I knew I had to do. And boy, when I started following the letter of the lessons, the letter of A Course in Miracles to the T, I wasn't always perfect. So I had to forgive myself a lot of times. I would start off and I was going to do it exactly as it said. And then I reverted back to my ego and I went into victim or bully. And then I had to forgive myself. And then I started again. One of the beautiful things about this work is that when you discover that God is grace, you then begin to give grace to yourself. You cannot help but feel the grace of a God that doesn't judge you. Every single time that I got my ego involved and I attempted to write what the Course was saying, nothing punished me. No fire rained on me. I always felt such a gentle, let's come back, let's do it again. Let's try it again. And every single time that I came back to try it again, I felt this support. I felt this gentle guidance helping me to be able to move through what was happening in such a way that I could feel such incredible peace within me. So it became really clear. If I follow the steps of the Course, everything does work up so lovingly and so gently. Thank you for the heart. I appreciate that. That's exactly what happens in the Course. You just find so much love. So it goes on to say, accept the plan you did not make instead. So instead of trying to do it with my ego, let me just follow the one plan that will lead to that. Judge not your value to it, because we value it and go, that's not going to work. So don't judge yourself for thinking all love and light is not going to work. It says in sentence 4, if God's voice assures you that salvation needs your part and that the whole depends on you, be sure that it is so. When I sat with this idea, am I really that powerful? Am I really that important in God's plan? And I began to move my ego out of the way, and I began to feel into that. I began to feel this, oh my gosh, I really am that powerful. I had been so blindsided by being focused on such a small idea of what I had power over, that I did not pay attention. I didn't like God. I didn't like anything about God. I didn't have a relationship I didn't want a relationship with God. But when I began to see the importance of cultivating a relationship with the Creator, because I was learning that the Creator is love, it changed me. I began to realize, oh my gosh, every one of us is important. I began to see my children instead of my children. I began to see them as my brothers and my sister. I began to recognize everybody was an equal to me, and all of us are important. It moved me out of the hierarchy of haves and have-nots, of idols and worshipers, and it began to bring me to where we're all created equal. That began to change my perspective, because now I stopped playing the game of, I belong to this party, not that party. I belong to this group, not that group. I belong to this religion, not that religion. I began to become more open-minded. And something amazing happened as I got curious. I began to listen to everybody. And then I realized how much I had believed that was not true. Because once I moved out of picking a side, I began to see we all want the same thing, but we can't focus on the same thing that we want because we're so busy defending what makes us different. I'm this party, I only do it this way. But what do you really want? Nope, it's this way. We stand for these things. But what do you really want? Well, I'm a single issue voter. But what do you really want? I remember having these conversations with people, 2016, 2017, 2018, and all the people that unfriended me, all the people that, how can you, if you're spiritual, be open-minded about this opposition? And because I'm doing God's work. I can't be concerned that you like me or don't like me. I'm following that the whole of salvation depends on me. It depends on me no longer putting people in a box. It depends on me no longer thinking I'm inferior or superior. So I can't do that to others if I want to move out of that in me, because as within, so without. And of course, that's when my riff with the spiritual community began, because the spiritual community, it's like everybody's brainwashed into this is what we do. And it was important for me for a while, because I was moving out of the religious conditioning, and the spiritual conditioning was more inclusive, but it's still a circle that you have to fit in. Even if it's a bigger circle, it's a circle. It was time to move beyond that for me. And when I listen to something like this, to be sure, when God assures me that salvation of the world depends on me, and that means I've got to see everybody as equal, well, am I going to listen to the spiritual community or the leader of one group or the head of one spiritual, somebody who wrote a book that I maybe have been following, or am I going to listen to God? So I had to make a choice, and it was God. There was just no other way. I cannot look at any human who says this is the way that you have to do it, not that way, and accept that as part of my reality. It's not anymore. It has to be inclusive. All beings have to be forgiven for the mistakes, because I've made mistakes too. That's why Jesus said, don't point at the speck in somebody else's eye until you take the log out of your own. And I realized, oh my God, I got so many logs. I cannot be judging anybody. There's just so much in me that I've done that has been done because I was listening to my ego, that I couldn't make myself superior to anybody else, nor could I participate and be inferior and listen to anybody tell me that my voice did not matter. My voice matters because God created it. And if God created it, then it matters. But is it speaking for God, or am I using the voice God gave me to speak for my ego, with my ego? Lots that has to be taken into account when you dive into these teachings. Then it goes on to say, the arrogant must cling to words, afraid to go beyond them to experience, which might affront their stands. Absolutely. When I needed to be right, this is my party, or this is my position, or this is how, I'm the mom and I'm right and you're the child and you're wrong. I had to look at those words. I had to pay attention. I had to take those beliefs and look at them and go, wow, it is an affront to my position to look at my words. I'm trying to tell my child, you have to do it this way. And it's like, when my kids, especially my boys, when they knew I was on this journey, especially Spencer, who, when he was going through his drug adventure, and I would say to him, I'm going to do things as God wants me to do them. And we were studying the course together. It's a beautiful part of our journey, but that's why we were so connected. And then I would be talking with my ego, and Spencer would call me out. Oh, Mom, I thought you were no longer, better than me. I thought we were equals. Now you're telling me what to do. So he would call me out on it. And it was so perfect because I was telling him, you're powerful. You can make your own decisions. And then I'm telling him, well, this is what you need to do to be able to blah, blah, blah. And he's like, wait a second, your ego's talking. I don't hear God in that. And I would come back to the Course in Miracles, which we were reading together, and I would just forgive myself. And he was so kind. He would say, Mom, I forgive you too. And I would look at him. I'm like, thank you. And I would tell him, I'm learning along with you. But if we really both want to free ourselves from our ego, we both have to commit to only God's word. So when he would do things and he'd get high and come back and be so pissy and mad that he either spent so much money on drugs, or that, he couldn't go to school or didn't get the work done and got a bad grade because he was high or partying or whatever, I would say to him, okay, be kind to yourself. Would God judge you for that? No, God wouldn't judge me. Why are you judging you? Oh, sounds like you're listening to your ego. Mom, don't be right about this. I need to be right now. And it was so funny because we helped each other really see that the ego is insane. Then he goes on to say, yet are the humble free to hear the voice which tells them what they are and what to do. Both Spencer and I, we had to get humble. We had to stop thinking that I was a parent and I knew better. I had to bring myself down from that pedestal. He needed to stop thinking he was a child and had the ability to, as he would say, fuck things up because he was just a kid. He had to raise his game. He had to come up. I had to come down, and we had to meet each other right there where we hold each other accountable to each being the powerful creators of our reality. If you don't want to get a bad grade, then stop getting high so that you can get your work done, because you can't quite do it when you're partying and your mind is not on right. Then you got to make a decision. But don't blame anybody else. It's not the drug's fault. It's not the friend's fault. It's not, my fault because I didn't make you get up and do your homework. It's your responsibility. If you want something to go in your direction, you've got everything inside of you to make that happen because you were created powerfully. So as we each began to hold each other accountable for our own powers, we stopped using each other to feed our ego, feed my bully, my need to bully, and tell him, yo, you got to get these things done and get a good grade so I look good. And then he would stop using, well, Mom, you didn't wake me up and make me go to school, or you're not being a good parent. I'm like, hey, I'm free to live my life how I want to do it. You're free to live your life how you're going to do it. All the consequences of your choices are yours. All the consequences of my choices are mine. I accept responsibility for what I'm doing, but I'm not going to accept the responsibility for what you're doing, period. And you don't accept a responsibility for what I'm doing. So at a very young age, he had to, because I was going through that process of freeing him from being oppressed by my thinking that I knew better. From that place, we both, came to a place of equality, but I had to humble myself, and so did he. Because he used that he was a child and he was a 14-year-old druggy fuck up to mess things up and then blames it on me because I'm not being the parent like the East Cop parent should have been, forcing him to do what he should do, which then he later on was so grateful that I didn't force him to do things because he learned from his mistakes. So paragraph 6 says, arrogance makes an image of yourself that is not real. My arrogance was making me think that I was superior. His arrogance was making him think that he was inferior. It is this image which quails and retreats in terror, as the voice for God assures you that you have the strength, the wisdom, and the holiness to go beyond all images. My ego did not like it when I would tell myself, I am not better than him, better than my son. My ego would like, what do you mean? You're the mother. You're responsible. I could hear that voice was quailing, as it says in here, was shivering, afraid that I was about to put it out of a job. Same thing happened to Spencer. We would talk about these things, and he would say, when I would tell myself that I am powerful, I could hear that voice that called me a fuck up saying, what do you mean you're powerful? You're not powerful. And he said, Mom, I was going crazy. I had these two voices in my head. And I'm like, me too. We were both going crazy at the same time, sharing our experience with each other. Because part of the beauty of the work of awakening is when you do it in community, you realize you're not alone. You realize that you, like everybody else, have an ego. It's been conditioned. You pick sides because you were taught to pick sides. And to stop picking sides, you're going to go through a process where you're going to feel schizophrenic. Because if you were on this side before, and now you have to accept this side and not take sides, you think you're going insane. You're not. You're waking up. That's all that's happening. You're not going crazy. You are just waking up to being someone who can see everything with love, with kindness, without arrogance, without, a sense of superior and inferior. Goes on to say in sentence 3, you are not weak, as is the image of yourself, the image that I had of me, the East Cobb mom that had to do things right, that made money, that blah, 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 blah. I had an image to uphold. When I decided to be as God created me, I had to let that image crumble. That was not easy. When the divorces came and I'm, oh my God, I'm a divorced person, that blew my image, my mask, what I was showing the world I was, this perfection that I had crafted was not who I was. It was an arrogant character, at best, a character that society taught me I needed to become. It was not easy letting all that I spent years, decades building crumble. Oh, thank you. Love you too, Ginger. So you are not arrogant. Oh, I'm sorry. You are not ignorant and helpless. You are not weak. So if I'm not weak, I'm not ignorant, I'm not helpless, what am I? How do I find that connection within me? That's the work. That's the work of the Course in Miracles. So then you've got to move on and do what it tells you. Sentence 5, sin cannot tarnish the truth in you, and misery can come not near the holy home of God. As I was reading the Course, and I'm hearing my holiness. I grew up Catholic. I grew up a sinner. I grew up believing I wasn't good enough. I grew up thinking I was going to go to hell. I wasn't going to measure up. That's why I wanted nothing to do with God. Why would I live my life for some, bearded man on a cloud to decide if I was naughty or nice? So I had a very hard time going through the Course and accepting my holiness. But I wasn't able to begin to accept my holiness until I started to see that, deliberately look that for in others. And I started with my children. I started with my husband at the time, Ken, as we were going through a divorce. I had to shift out of thinking I was right and he was wrong to moving to we were both holy, to moving to opening up my heart again to him. Even though he did things that my ego didn't like, my soul had no judgment of him because I was becoming like God. I was accepting the godlike qualities in me that saw the holiness in him and began to accept, okay, we were just not, we came together and we each believe what we believe and we were just not going to be compatible anymore. So that's okay. Bless my holy brother, go on your merry way, and I hope you find what you're looking for. And me too. So that awareness that sin could not tarnish the truth of who I am, I had to apply to everybody else. That's why I couldn't be with one political party and have the other political party be something that I judged. It had to be, okay, I see everybody is a holy child of God and all have the qualities that they bring to the party. Who is operating by these qualities? Who's operating by more of these qualities? That's how I assess who I support, because I want to support one who's more godly, knowing that in the world, we still have egoic tendencies. It's okay. I forgive them because I have no right to judge anybody as being less than the perfect being that God created. Because all of us have been conditioned to believe things that are not true, especially that we're separate and that some are better than others. That belief, I have to forgive it because it's learned. It's not part of who we are. And we can't remove that learned belief until we start getting curious about who we really are. That's what the awakening journey is about. You become curious about the truth. But then you have to face the lies, and it's not easy to face the lies. Like I said, you feel schizophrenic when you're doing that. Paragraph 7 says, all this, the voice for God relates to you, which is the truth. And as he speaks, the image trembles and seeks to attack and to attack the threat it does not know, sensing its basis crumble. Your ego, the voice in you, will not be happy with you when you begin to override it. When I needed to be right, and I would tell myself, no, Laina, we're not going to be right about this. You humble yourself, sister. And I would go, oh my God, I'm going to let them talk to me like that? Yeah, they can talk to you any way they want to talk to you. And this is when Ken was being very belligerent with me. And I was like, you sit there. And I would have the voice of God saying, you stand there, sit there, whatever. And you receive it as his truth, not as yours. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I could do that. I could sit here and have somebody insult me and it doesn't bother me. The only way that was possible was because I was seeing him as the ego talking, not the essence of who he was. When I connected with his essence, then I just had pure compassion for him, because anybody who's judging somebody outside of them, they're judging from a place of woundedness inside of them. And when he would say ugly things to me, I knew he was saying ugly things about himself inside. He couldn't separate the two. I could. So I did. I separated his light from his darkness. I separated how God created him from how he was indoctrinated. And then I would focus on that little boy that, just like me as a little girl, came in happy, perfect, and complete. And from that place, I had nothing but compassion for a grown man who was operating from a wounded sense of self. I operated my life from a wounded sense of self. Because when my daddy left when I was 10 years old, I felt abandoned, and I went on to cling to people to make me feel whole and complete and happy. So I knew that he had his own wounds. I knew them because I heard him share his wounds, and he was wounded. His wounds were talking, not him, not the whole holy being that he was. So as I separated that in him, I was able to move through that divorce in a very different way. There was no attack needing to come from me because I had compassion and forgiveness for him. So we moved on our separate ways. Same thing with Spencer. I wasn't going to be attacking him because he was doing drugs. That was his woundedness. And where did so much of his woundedness come from? Me. I had to own that I contributed to him not feeling good enough, feeling like a fuck up, because I had been maintaining a persona that, well, my kids are at this standard. I'm an East Cobb mom. I'm a member of the PTA. I'm a successful person. So my kids better live up to this. Well, what if they didn't want to live up to that? They didn't get a choice because I had to keep on my persona. So I had to look at Spencer. So much of his insecurities came because I was the controlling parent. I told him what to do. I made sure that he wore the things that he had to wear. I made sure I fought the fights that he couldn't fight because I needed to look good. Where did he get a voice? He couldn't find his voice when I was the voice for him. And so many of us believe that we have to be the voice for our children because they don't have a voice. That's part of the system teaching us that our kids don't have a voice because the system doesn't listen to the voice of children. So it gives the parents a false sense of righteousness that then we take on as adults that, oh, I don't have a voice, or my kids then don't get a voice. This is a process of unlearning so many things that have been messed up with the system. And here we are being told that there's a voice inside of us, and that voice inside of us for God that begins to speak truth makes the other voice inside of us for the ego crumble with fear because it doesn't want to give up power and control. But my goodness, the most beautiful thing, the most liberating thing that I experienced was when I began to tell myself I wasn't right. When I began to call myself out on my own bullshit. And I began to say, this is the ego talking, this is God. And I began to notice that clearly, call it out in me with honesty. I had two voices. They were opposing, always opposing. No wonder I felt schizophrenic for years until I began to side with the one voice that had me feel certain and clear about who I am. Then I began to let everybody else off the hook. They didn't have to do anything to make me happy. My happiness came because God said it was my purpose. And I began to take control for being happy no matter what. Then people around me could feel free to be themselves. Then nobody had to worry about making Laina look good or doing what Laina wanted, mom wanted, or wife wanted. So liberating for everybody around me. But at the time that I'm changing from ego to God, it rocked my life. People couldn't handle it outside of me for a while because they didn't know who I was. I was literally Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One day, I'm not even one day, 1 hour, I'm connected to God, love, and light. And the next hour, my ego's trying to control things. So it takes a while. But if you make the commitment to allow yourself to follow through on what you believe is true, like our founding fathers risked their lives to come to this new world and create documents that ensured the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of us because we're equal. Until you recognize that you have to do that in you, and then you must grant that to others, you're not living in sovereignty. You're not independent. And we're celebrating Declaration of Independence. Most people celebrate the Declaration of Independence not knowing that they're really actually oppressed, that they're under the control, mind control of a system that says that they get to only celebrate their independence on one day out of the year. Why are we not celebrating that every single day of the year? Because we really don't feel independent. We are oppressed, working like crazy to pay the bills, to pay things in a system that has us be slaves to a financial system, to a system of religion, to a system of indoctrination that keeps us from knowing the truth of the God that we actually are. Because you see, the world outside that we have empowered would crumble and is crumbling the more that we begin to take our power back, to have our voice, to not allow ourselves to be censored, to let everybody have their say. That's fundamental in the first, in the rights that we have, the ability to free speech. Everybody should say whatever they want. And if you allow everybody to speak, you don't need to censor anybody, keep them from speaking. You're not interested in that. Don't listen to them. Go listen to a different channel. But this idea of censoring comes from the ego because only the ego controls and suppresses, censors, and cancels anybody. The Course in Miracles it is a document that is so clear that when you sit and you go, wow, if I apply this to my life, your life would change. The idea of separation would end. The idea that you are, insignificant, that anybody is superior to you would end, as it would end that you're superior to anybody else. And I'll complete this paragraph here. Sentence number 3 in paragraph 7. When it talks about the ego, it says, let it go. Salvation of the world depends on you and not upon this little pile of dust, which is nothing but stories that you have been told that are not true. What can it tell the Holy Son of God? Why need he be concerned with it at all? When I would read things like that, as I was studying the course, committed to what it was telling me. What do you mean? Why am I concerned with my ego? I was only concerned with my image. I was concerned with needing to be right. I was concerned with the way I looked to others. When I stopped being concerned about that, and I made a commitment to let that go and to find that voice inside of me, it's a journey. It took time. It's not one and done. And I had many, many mystical experiences that helped me ground myself in the knowingness of this truth. But then I had the stuff in my mind operating that I had to override, that I had to shift, that I had to decide, I'm not going to believe what's in my head. I'm not. And when I made the decision, the most powerful decision that I've ever made was to not believe my own stuff, to question my own beliefs. Then I really began to understand the process that I needed to go through to experience liberation. You cannot believe your ego and experience peace or grace or love or anything that resembles love. It's not possible. When we decide to be wrong about our righteousness, a whole new world opens up. And it's a world that allows you to begin to feel what God is all about. So I'm going to stop here because there's 14 paragraphs and we just completed 7. So come back next week. We'll complete whenever we complete this lesson, we'll go back to the text. So if anybody has anything you want to share, any nuggets that you got from this share today, from this lesson, from this transmission, unmute yourself and share it. Otherwise, we will connect next week. Yes, Stacy, did you raise your hand?
I did. This could not have been more perfect for me. Like 20 minutes before this Zoom meeting, I was on the phone with Brandon, and he was talking about things he was going to do about, I'm keeping my place, I'm going to go back to work, blah, blah. And I interjected because, I know best because I've been there. And he said, every time I think to do something, all I get is I'm a fuck up. And in that moment, I said, you know what, Brandon, you're right. And I'm sorry, you're a sovereign being and you have the choice to do it however you choose to do it.
And that was the most loving thing you could possibly ever say to him.
And then when you got down into 7, all this, the voice for God relates to you. And as he speaks, the image trembles and seeks to attack the thread. It does not know sensing its bases crumble. I lost it.
Yeah. Yeah, sister, what's crumbling inside of you is that righteous sense of self. It's all egoic. It's not even who you are. That part of you that tries to tell him what he should do better, it's not even who you are. Aren't you tired of being that fake?
Yeah, and I just seen it as this is the practice. This is your practice, and yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Oh my God, I'm so grateful for you, Laina, and the Course of Miracles, and the journey that I'm on with all this.
It's uncomfortable being wrong, isn't it?
Oh gosh. But it's also freeing.
On the other side, yes, that's exactly what comes on the other side, but not until you feel the discomfort of being wrong. That's what's painful, is you're undoing that arrogant self, which is not you.
Yeah.
And what shows up for Brandon and everybody else is the gentle, loving, real you that saves him, spares him from all the bullshit that you think you know better. We don't. We don't. And then we laugh about it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Grateful for laughter.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that, sweetie. Thank you.
Thank you, Laina.
Absolutely.
So much.
Absolutely. If anybody else have anything to share, unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll resume next weekend. And feel free to share this with anybody else. For all previous episodes, go to my YouTube, Laina Orlando, and you'll find them there. All except for the ones that YouTube censored because I was too much about our sovereignty. All right. Cherie, thank you so much for joining us today. Glad to
Thank you
have
so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Good, good. All right. And if this meant something to you, feel free to share it with others. Love you all.
Love
Take
you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.